How do you do? 'Cause I'm feeling so good.
What is up, you guys? My name is Hridayam Pavatina and welcome to my new YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to build your own PC. So let's get started.
The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
First, we need to start by unlocking the processor socket by unhooking the tiny rod from its latched position. I lost some footage in the beginning, so I had to redo the unlatching part for the chipset. But the motherboard should look like this before you place the chipset in the socket. When placing the chipset in the socket, we need to make sure that the marker on the corner of the chipset matches with the designated marker on the motherboard. And it's important to make sure that you're holding the chipset by the edges and not touching the bottom. You can shake the processor a bit to make sure that it's in place. And to lock the socket, you just need to put the tiny rod back into its latched position. Since AMD chipsets come with their own CPU fans, they usually have some pre-applied thermal paste beneath the fan, so we should make sure that we don't touch the thermal paste and ruin it. While placing the CPU fan on the motherboard, we need to make sure that the screws are correctly aligned over the four corners properly. The connector for the CPU fan should go to the connector specified CPU fan 1 on the motherboard, and the connector goes in one way only. While screwing the CPU fan in, make sure to screw it in a cross pattern to avoid putting too much pressure on the motherboard on either corner of the CPU fan mount. And don't tighten the CPU fan too much, as it should be firm but not too loose or too tight. For this build, we're going to be using a 16 GB RAM stick. While placing the RAM in, open the side tabs and make sure that the orientation of the RAM is properly aligned, as there's only one way to put it in. After aligning it, make sure to put pressure on both sides of the RAM at the same time. The tabs should fall back in place automatically. For installing the M.2 SSD, we have to first unscrew the M.2 shield and remove the shield so that we can place the SSD in. When placing the SSD in, make sure that you place it in a 30-degree angle and then close the M.2 shield by pushing it and the SSD to the screw point, and make sure that the screw hole is lined up correctly and that you screw it in place firmly. Since I'm using an ATX sized motherboard for this build, there should be 9 places where the motherboard should be screwed to the cabinet with the help of standoffs. Standoffs give some height from the metal base of the cabinet to avoid the motherboard from getting short-circuited. If they're not installed already, they will be given with the cabinet, like in my case. The panel connections on top can control the power functions and can link external devices to the motherboard as well when connected with the given wires. We need to organize the wires so that the wires behind can go to the front through the appropriate holes based on where they're going to settle on the motherboard. It's important to remove or break one of the removable rack kind of pieces to access the graphic card connections, and we need to unscrew this big piece to allow for the easy installation of the graphics card later in the video. The next step is to install the I/O or input and output shield to protect the I/O connections on the motherboard from dust and electrostatic discharge. Before placing the shield in, it's a good idea to check if the motherboard's connections to the shield are matching and then install it. The softer part should be on the inside and the hard part should be seen outside. While placing the motherboard inside, make sure to clear any obstructions below it and make sure to match the 9 designated standoffs and the I/O shield to ensure a proper fit. Then we can grab our screws and screw the ATX size motherboard in the 9 designated holes to the standoffs. While installing the graphics card, it's important to avoid touching the backside of it. Since we already removed the obstructing piece in the beginning, we just need to unlock the side tab of the PCIe slot and push the graphics card properly in place. Then the tab will automatically lock itself. Then we can grab the piece we removed at the beginning and screw the GPU and the piece to the cabinet. Based on what kind of cabinet you have and where you're going to keep your PC, you can either keep the power supply fan facing up or down. Since I'm going to keep my PC on the desk, I'm going to place the fan facing down. After placing the fan inside, we just need to screw the power supply to the cabinet with the screws given with the power supply. The secondary power supply cables for the CPU go through the hole at the upper right corner, and the main power supply and the PCIe power supply for the GPU go through the hole at the left. Since I'm only using the M.2 SSD, I just strategically shoved the additional SATA connectors in the HDD bay and left one SATA connector for the RGB cabinet lighting. For the back panel to fit, manage the wires and push them against the panel to spread them out and get rid of any clumps of cables. Alright, it's time to close it up and get it ready for testing.